Hello and welcome into the PHNX Rising podcast presented by the DraftKings Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook app. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe even leave us a 5-star review. I'm Owen Evans, joined by Deadwin himself, Edwin Perez. Edwin, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Are we gonna have to start a new hashtag with Ramon gone? He is not here
Oh,
today. So is there gonna be a new hashtag cooked up in the comments? We
it
have
do-
to see.
it doesn't quite fit, does it? Your name fits that perfectly. I mean,
It does. It's
it's just
scary.
too perfect. That's the
It,
problem.
yeah, it's scary how good and how much the story fits, even with Sean DePaz, which obviously the fans love so much. So it just makes sense. But Ramon, we're gonna have to make up a new backstory and try to figure out a hashtag for it.
Well, maybe it's Sean again. Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe,
It
maybe.
could be. I'm just saying, if there was anyone I was going to go in and look at, who's behind this, it might be Sean.
I think all the fans would agree. Well, at least I'll agree with that.
Well, we've got a lot to get through today, so let's kick off straight now with looking at the elephant in the room, which is, of course, that Rising lost on Sunday away in Carson, 3-0 to LA Galaxy 2. Is it going to be a somber show today, Edwin?
I mean, it's a little bit because as you kind of saw it in training, and we haven't read Owen's great article. I'll give it a plug. I mean, the man got a promotion to host today, so I'll give him a plug for his story, so he doesn't have to do all the work by himself. But I guess the boys are not in as much of a somber mood, so maybe that's how we should be feeling. But at the end of the day, a 3-0 loss to a team, Los Dos, that I don't think is as talented as some of the squads that they're facing, you got to be at least a little somber on a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's still hard to get over because it's not just a loss, is it? It feels like that margin of victory, and it wasn't quite like the previous year where you've got those goals late. The goals came early. It felt like they fell behind quite quickly. It's hard to feel too good, really, looking back on it. But besides that, of course, some people did have comments. But look, let's start off by saying Rick sounded pretty clear about how he was feeling earlier this week. He put out this tweet yesterday on the topic, and I'll read it out now. We start a new week, but must learn from our mistakes. We were naive and did not give our opponents enough respect. We were punished by a good team. This will help us to improve. We must work hard to be ready for our next opponent. So that was Rick yesterday. At the end of today's training session, I got the chance to speak with Rick about it. Here's what he had to say on that.
You watch the first 15, 20 minutes and you think to yourself, how are we down 2-0? I think the first goal, we talked about it. We had over-rotated a little bit. Whether he was trying to cross or shoot, it doesn't matter. The ball went in the goal. We should have been able to close down faster. But we made individual mistakes that got punished, and goals change games. And I think that was part of the issue. It wasn't tactics. It wasn't effort. It wasn't that we played poorly. We created, I think we almost outshot them. We did a lot. And even with 10 guys, I thought we were very good. But now that I've had a chance to kind of rewatch it, really think about it, I wish I could take my words back in my social media posts, because I don't think that we underestimated them at all. I just think goals change games.
So that was just a snippet of what Rick had to say today. There is more, as Edwin said in my article at gophnx.com. If you haven't already signed up, now's the time. Become a PHNX member and unlock a world of Arizona sports coverage you never imagined possible. Remember that your membership covers all the sports we cover, so not only will you unlock all of my written content, but you get access to some of the best coverage from across the valley on the Suns, Cardinals, Coyotes, D-backs, Sun Devils, Wildcats, and of course, now we're going to have some Mercury coverage coming soon. Head to gophnx.com and become a member of the family, and you'll either get a free t-shirt from the PHNX Locker or your first month for just 50 cents. Now, let's dive specifically into those comments from Rick, okay? The ones that we just played. It felt to me almost there as though he's suggesting they were a bit unlucky on the night, even.
It's for me. I don't think it's fair to say that, though. Obviously, that's us reacting. I agree. That's kind of what his sentiment is saying. But I don't think it was just that they were unlucky. I mean, you saw it in that first half. I mean, we all had an honest chat, during halftime, and said Rising deserved to be down, right? This is not a Rising team that deserved to be in. Yes, they could have gotten a goal in there, which would have changed the match completely. But this game, Los Dos just controlled it. It just seemed like it could have been easily 4-5-6-0, right? And that was the discussion we were having. It was not that should Rising deserve a point out of the game. It was more of Los Dos finishing was terrible. They should have gotten more goals out of it. It just looks like they got what they wanted attacking wise. That defense wasn't strong at all. And as the comments saying, Jose, the Phoenix Rising backline was Swiss cheese in that game. I mean, it just wasn't. For me, it's just crazy that he believes that this was just a unlucky game for them, and I don't think that's fair. I do like the sentiment though that he said at the end where he was like, "We didn't overlook them." You know, I want to take that back because I was like, that was the early part of the season when we saw back-to-back losses. That was the excuse. Fair enough. I'll agree to that then, but you can't be saying that, especially now moving forward with the tougher schedule, tougher teams you're gonna face. Like that can't be the excuse for Rising. You know, every game's gonna be tough.
But here's the thing, though. It might, we can look at it as though it's an excuse, but could it be true? Do you think that Rising went in this perhaps a bit? Because remember, LA Galaxy 2 aren't a team that have won a lot of games. They beat Monterey Bay, but realistically, everybody's beating Monterey Bay at the moment. They managed to beat RGV at home. They'd come to Phoenix, a few weeks previously and lost 3-1. Do you think that maybe there was that little bit of naivety still going in, even though now they're trying to downplay that? It just feels as though they should have come out better against a team that, quite frankly, was poor. And we can talk about, and I know Michael's mentioning in there that Santi should have had a goal. And yes, Rising did have chances, they didn't convert. But again, LA Galaxy had chances they didn't convert. They could have scored, as he said, 4 or 5 games in that. 4 or 5 goals, sorry.
No, absolutely. And I agree to you there, right? When you look at the opponents they're going to face coming up, the one that you may overlook would have been Los Dos, right? And that's clear. But I think the mentality, especially after these last few seasons, what Rising's got to realize is no matter what team you're going to face, they're going to bring their 100% because they treat this as their championship game. This is what they treat as their model of what we can do against tough teams because they know Rising is one of the top teams in the USL. There's no question of that, talent-wise, at least on paper, right? So you got to realize that teams are going to do that regardless of how good they've been or how they've done in the league. So you just can't take that approach of saying, okay, we were just naive and all that. Yes, I get that, and that's fair, especially in a game like that. But when every team's going to put their 100%, especially Los Dos, I mean, you saw it. They got the goal in the second minute. Was that a shot? Was that a cross? I mean, that's up for debate, but they were not afraid of Rising, and they took it to them because they said we're not going to back down. So Rising's got to be prepared for that moving forward, at least.
And let's, there's a lot of comments in the chat at the moment now that are talking about they think the tactics were wrong. I think it's not a good sign, is it, when your best play is coming when you've got 10 men on the field? Right? And that's in some ways it's a positive, right? They kept fighting. They did actually have a fair few chances in that second half. But the best play is coming when the other team are 3-0 up and you've got a man advantage. They've got a man advantage. That's just not a good sign, is it? I don't think that Hurst necessarily worked in that role as well as Rick might want to say today, but it just felt as though, as a whole, even if they were creating chances, they couldn't stop chances, and Rising just weren't clinical, which has been a problem we've seen all season, right? But even looking at some of the others, rates, were they necessarily the best chances? Some of them were definitely, caused problems for the goalkeeper. But that's the thing. We're not talking about as though their goalkeeper kept them in this game.
No.
We're talking about a situation where Rising couldn't get on the score sheet, didn't for large spells of the game look especially capable of getting on the score sheet. I mean, that first half was it was bad. Let's just be straight. It was bad.
It was abysmal. It was abysmal. So, and I agree with you with the Greg Hurst. I did not intend to enjoy that tactic, especially when he's been your best number 9. I think he's got to be that number 9 guy. But I'm curious. I'm going to throw it back to you, Owen. Obviously, it's easy now to look at that game and say what you would change. But what tactically would you change in that game, or maybe moving forward that clearly did not work in that game? Because I mean, I think that's what obviously led up to 3 goals. Obviously, the red card changed the game completely, but also tactically, it just seemed it was a little bit of a mismatch.
I think what we kind of had was I know Rick after the game suggested that it was because Arturo hadn't been performing, but we also kind of are getting into a spot where Santi was ready to come back, though he didn't start, obviously. There was no real willingness necessarily to drop some of the other guys. Like Joey had caused some problems in games past. Marcus, for whatever, we've had questions over Marcus. I know for some people there's questions of patience. You'd hope that he's improving and continuing to, and from speaking to him today, he's definitely, trying to work on where things went wrong for him in the final third, where he could have had chances to score goals or where he had chances to better set up teammates, and where did that go wrong? And then you've got Claudio, who hasn't been, I wouldn't have said, on form lately. And so it's just trying to mishmash everyone in there together. And for whatever reason, we see that kind of four that just didn't feel right. Now, of course, having Joey Calistri out there maybe was a little bit helpful when Darnell gets sent off, because you've got a guy you can slip back there to right back. But it just didn't. I don't know. To me, you're looking at going back. I think Arturo needs to come back in. I think that's just where we are with that. I think that then you're looking realistically, if Santi's ready to start, you probably want to start him because he caused a lot of problem off the bench. When he came on, he looked pretty decent, as did Arturo. And so you're realistically dropping one of Hurst, Repetto, Epps, and I mean, Calistri. We don't know if it was very, cards close to the chest on what's going to happen with the suspended Darnell King, obviously. But the best guess at this point, of course, is that probably a Joey Calistri at the back kind of situation. It's just a lot to kind of break down. And it's hard because Michael's now bringing up, of course, in the chat about Lambert back in midfield. That's something that we've been thinking about. But then do you want to take Luis out? And there's just so many moving parts to this where certain bits may have been working, but some of it may have not have longevity to them, let's say.
Yeah.
And they've worked in games, but that doesn't mean that you can just turn to that as the new default. It's really a difficult one, isn't it?
It's a really difficult one, because I think I agree with a lot of what you said. And I think a lot of it for me is shifting also Lambert back in the midfield, because of you're going to have availability of Seaver, it looks like, which we'll talk about a little later, in the back. But you also have options in Musa coming back from injury possibly, and you have Mano Madrid. So obviously that opens up a whole different realm. But also what's also hard to kind of talk about tactics and all that is I'm trying to think of whose fault it was in that last game that they struggled, right? Because like you want to reflect on what happened, what went wrong, and which players didn't work out. How can we shift? For me, I'm trying to find the one player to stick it on, and then it's not to come and to criticize them, but it's to see how they can improve and move forward with it. And I think that's where the question gets hard for me. I don't know if you have a strong feeling about someone, but I just feel like as a whole, there's points in everyone's game that just was flawed, right? Because I'm not going to go and pinpoint it. Oh, this was on Repetto for not having, he wasn't informed, right? That was 100% true. Lambert, who has been consistently strong defensively, he was out of position a few times. He was just he just got outplayed sometimes, right? So it's hard for me to pinpoint one person in that performance, what makes it hard moving forward, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to go down that, if we want to go down the route that Rick was suggesting, which is it's not on the tactics, it's more, it's not even about the mentality, but it's about individual errors. You then got to move on to the next question then, which is, well, where are we putting the fault? Because to me, I guess if you're going to go down the individual errors route, there's one person in particular you're singling out, kind of, and I think we all know who that is, because there's only one real individual error that you'd say led to the complete downfall of the game. And that was the red card, which utterly killed off any chance, really, of a comeback, I think, at that point. I mean, beyond that, you're either talking about the fact that there are, you're talking about the fact that there are so many individual errors, effectively, that it ground down play at times that it looked like it did, in which case that's far more of a I don't personally. I look at that as though it's more of a negative thing to look at, even that just execution all around was not there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think it's a whole team unit kind of because I don't want to place it on one person. Obviously, you mentioned, the obvious, which is the red card, and obviously that's something to discuss. We'll discuss in a little bit, but other than that, I mean, you can't really go, okay, this one is on X, Y, Z. Yes, they all had a failure, but I think as a team, all of them just did not play well. I think Los Dos just outplayed them, and you can take away as a team, this is where things went wrong, and this is what we need to change, right? And that's where I'm focusing because, as you mentioned, you can get to nitty gritty of pointing out everyone's mistakes, but that's going to be looking at it very negatively, and also that's just going to be reflecting on the team. You're just going to keep reflecting on it, and with Rising, the schedules are going to get harder. They have a busy schedule coming up, especially with the Open Cup. You got to move forward because if you're reflecting on that past performance, I'll tell you, game's not going to get easier. I mean, you got a heck of a schedule coming up.
Well, one thing actually on that game specifically. Now we heard from Rick about falling behind early doors. That kind of came out of nowhere, and it didn't really give him a chance to get into the match. And Marcus Epps said similarly today as well. So, how critical do you really think it was that they went behind so early?
I think it was more critical for Los Dos than it is for Rising. Because I think for Los Dos, I mean, you're facing an opponent, obviously, that had come off a month that was 6-0, that are starting to figure out their things. Obviously, they're not 100% like progressing wise or at their top peak, but they're figuring things out. It's one of the harder teams in the league. And you get a goal in the second minute, you're feeling much better about what you're doing early on. You feel much more free, much more easy that you don't have to be defensive the whole time, right? Because I think in their mindset, they thought Rising was going to score at least one, especially with this team and its attack. You got to assume that they typically score one goal. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be a fact, but that's the side of the fact. So that one goal is crucial for them. For Rising, I think it can be mentally deflating, right? Because you go out in the game, you're feeling good, you're feeling confident, especially after a good month, right? And you give up that goal, that's going to hurt. But one goal should not be the end all be all for this team, right? The one goal, this Rising attack, who they have off the bench and who they have on the starting lineup, talent wise, you cannot let one goal deflate you too much. And that's where at least I turn my attention to. Yes, it hurts you, especially that early on in the game, but I think you just got to rally your team up, and you got to realize, yes, we're down 1-0. This was a tough mistake, especially on a goal that matter, and what happened. You got to say, listen, it happened. Let's move forward. We got the talent. You got to believe in your tactics that we're going to be back in this game.
Yeah, we've seen Rising come back so often. In fact, I've seen, I believe since 2019, there is no team that has more come from behind wins in USL than Phoenix Rising. So that's almost the problem. Tell us one thing that's working and one thing that is not for each line. That's
interesting.
That is interesting. That needs some thinking. You know what? I'm going to flat out say initially, though, that I'm not putting anything, regardless of what anyone may have wanted to say or bringing up in various social media platforms on Sunday. I'm not putting any of this on Ben Lund. Let's be clear here. There is none of this blame for what happened on Sunday can be put on the goalkeeper. So there's one start, right? One start is we're just going to say there isn't a thing not working necessarily at the back in goal. Sorry. Defensively, I think that they are still dealing with, while we can talk about how Kev brings more pace and perhaps a different kind of play to the others are, he's still a little bit struggling positionally, I think, at times with reading quite what he has to do and gets caught. And the fullbacks, especially then, sometimes also get caught. I know that it was brought up in the chat earlier that Darnell got caught a few times in that game, and he did. I think that's something where the fullbacks still are a little bit vulnerable, which is something we've gotten used to seeing with Rising. But again, it's a topic that comes up again and again. It's something we need to consider in that. In the midfield, I think that while you've got guys like Luis and Quinn can take long range shots, can create things in that way, they didn't really feel like they were controlling that game against the Galaxy too. It felt like there were spells where they weren't necessarily as creative as they could be. And then up top, I think that it's a question of just not, if you're going to play Claudio, you've got to play to Claudio's strengths, if that makes sense. And I don't think they've been doing that. Now, alternatively, is you don't try playing to Claudio's strengths and you go with Hurst, but then it's all these different trade-offs and it's hard. I think that Marcus is still struggling a little bit with just not necessarily committing to his runs as much as he should and taking people on as much as he should when those are winnable chances. And sometimes he'll slow the game down when he shouldn't necessarily be slowing the game down. And it's all kind of things like that. That wasn't necessarily a clear answer to what Scott was saying. No, I think we broke down kind of.
You did very well. You did very well. I mean, just to add on that, I agree with the Ben Lunt. I think you cannot blame any of what happened that game on him. Just look at the performance all season long. I mean, he's been the reason why they've hung in these games, why they've won those games. So you cannot blame him for last one. Defensively, the only thing I would add is that defensively, it's been the most kind of threatening defense I've seen in previous years. I think the defense, they've had their struggles and all that, and I think it's what we're continuing seeing this year. Except this year, I think they're creating more chances. They're being more threatening in the box. When you see Emmanuel Madrid, and I keep talking about him a little bit, is because he has been one of the most reliable attacking options with his head, and I think that's what we're seeing more defensively. Lambert with his run and the goal that he made, even from defense. So we're seeing that, but also the flip side, as you're saying, they're getting caught. So that's the flip of it. And midfield, you did great highlighting it. I mean, just add Aiden Quinn. He looks great. I mean, I just think they're just not controlling the game as much as they can. But I think talent-wise, I think that midfield is just spectacular. They just got to figure it out and who they're going to play, especially if you're going to bring back Lambert. I think you start Arturo, and just talent-wise, those three midfield, I don't think they'll beat most of the league, if not all the league. And then front three, as you're mentioning, I mean, I think it's just there's some players that are still needing to figure out their form, especially Repetto and Epps. But for me, the highlight is you got Santi, who is starting to get into his form, right? He's becoming threatening and more threatening as the season goes on, because we've been waiting for Santi more game. He's getting into his own. And Greg Hurst, I mean, what a reliable option they found. I mean, he's an all-around guy who's doing it, and you got to applaud him. I mean, and for Repetto, nothing against him. It's not that I'm criticizing him. I just think the crossing hasn't been there for him, and I think that's just another flaw of what's been happening this year.
And let's just bring in, because Jose's made a comment here in the chat about better marking. Yes, I actually think that's a good point. Especially, they're not necessarily tracking the players too well, the attacking players, especially in those transitional moments. I think that there are times when things just feel a little bit chaotic sometimes in the Rising defense, whereby it feels like there are always people moving around and getting into space, and the defenders aren't really tracking them very well. And that's definitely a complicated one, but it just feels like that's been the case, especially in some of those second half counterattacks that LA Galaxy 2 had, where it felt like they were bringing 4 players, Rising are bringing 4 players, but the Rising 4 players were kind of a little bit jumbled up and weren't quite sure where they were going. And then Galaxy would get a shot off, or the cross would be bad or something. So the Rising were bailed out, but it just didn't feel like it was. It just felt like a very, very risky moment, to be honest, and it happened multiple times in the second half.
Yeah, and Greg made a point of it when he talked to us about, going back and doing your role on defense. That's something he wants to do. It's something that he wants to take pride in doing. And I think that's going to be the whole unit, and which is why I think we're having a conversation of putting Lambert back in the midfield, because, he's going to trap back and do his role very well. Aiden will too. The only issue is creativity, and, because I think that's been also an issue. But, yeah, I think Jose's point is just, very, very honest and very truthful, because this defense on its own, the back four, is not going to do its job on its own. It's going to struggle. And if we're relying just on them 4 in the back, I think we're going to see a lot of high scoring. So that just can't be a solution for them.
Well, if you, like us, had to sit through that match on Sunday, maybe there was a way you could have made it more enjoyable. I mean, if you're sitting here through this somber show Today, in particular, maybe there was a way you could have made it more enjoyable. Maybe you could have stopped by your local dispensary and grabbed some amazing scratch-made THC gummies from our friends at OG's. They just launched their new mini OG's 3 milligram microdose option for those not wanting to dive straight into their regular 10 milligram. Try the tropical flavor in either sativa or indica strains. These are now available exclusively at Zenleaf locations through the 11th of the month. If you're interested in trying the amazingly delicious variety of flavors that OG's Brands has to offer, go to ogsbrands.com. That's OGEEZbrands.com to find OG's near you. So back onto business now, and we're going to pick up something specifically from social media and from a lot of the talk going on after Sunday's match. So Darnell King, the captain, obviously was sent off. People had opinions, strong opinions sometimes. Some going so far as to suggest that he wasn't the best choice for the captaincy or that he should even be stripped of it. Well, I put that to Rick Schantz and Marcus Epps today, and here's what they had to say.
They don't know who he is as a person. I think people watch the games and we all make mistakes and how we respond to our mistakes. He and I had a good meeting this morning and talked a lot about, the performance versus being a captain and what it really means to the club, and that he's still one of the best human beings, and I think people have to think long and hard about what they're saying about whether he should be a captain or not. I remember times when other captains didn't have great performance and no one ever questioned that part of it.
They don't spend every minute with Darnell. They don't spend time around the team and see how much Darnell just kind of brings the group together in general, whether it's saying good morning family to everyone, whether staying after, making sure guys are on it, on and off the field, and the hard work he does on the field speaks for itself. I think it's a little unfair for him to be criticized on one moment, this season. And I think he's been a great body of work this season on the field, and then off the field. There's not enough that can be said about Darnell and what he does as a captain for this group, and we all believe in him. The whole staff believes in him, and we stand by him.
Right, so Darnell is going to serve a 1-game suspension, by the way, after his red card in that last match. That's what Rick told us today. It is just going to be the 1 game. Edwin, let's start by talking about how much we think the team's going to miss him in that match as a result of the suspension.
I think it's definitely going to be something that, obviously, it's a huge hit, and the defensive line where there's a lot of questions to be answered, things to be fixed. You knew Darnell was someone that's going to start regardless, and you knew what he brought to the table. So you're taking that away, then you're asking questions about who's going to start in his spot, what's going to happen if you rotate, someone like Flood or even Calistri in there. What's going to happen with the defense? Who's going to be the communication, right? Because I think what Darnell does so well is he communicates with that whole back line so well. So who's going to do that? So I think just for that impact, that's just going to be huge, and even the people who are on social media, clowning Darnell in that mistake. I mean, I think this game you'll realize why he's the captain. There's definitely going to be something missing back there.
Yeah, and let's just be clear here, because it was an entirely deserved red card, okay? It was a moment of utter madness by him. I'm not sure quite what it was that he thought he was doing there. But it does feel like this is all just getting a little bit too far now, doesn't it? Like, when people are talking about taking the captaincy away from him for that, I just wonder where that's coming from, because it's a bad mistake. Let's not beat around the bush there. It was a very bad mistake in the moment, but it's not like this isn't a sackable offense, is it? I mean, come on.
No. I mean, we've seen captains all over the world and all over the place do much worse and still hold on to their badge. To take one bad game, and yes, as you mentioned, obviously it is a mistake and something that he shouldn't put the club in this situation, but we're not talking about something that's way worse. It's a 1-game suspension. He's going to learn from this. I think this is the biggest thing, is this was his first year in the captaincy role. You still got things to learn about what it means to be a captain for this club, even on the field, right? So when you're frustrated, you can't release that, right? Because that's reason why some of the other boys in this team may have not gotten the badge, because they'll take the fight to the players, right? Darnell's got to be the cool-minded head that's there to communicate with the boys and make sure everything's going well. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a crazy take, and you as a fan, if you're a true fan of Rising, and what it's meant. There's been much worse mistakes all around the world, so you really cannot be believing that you want him out as a captain.
And I think that's the thing as well, right? Even when we're looking at this from our perspective, okay, and we're not in the locker room, we don't get quite that same view. But we do get a slightly different view to what the average fan does. And even just seeing the kind of way the guys react around him, seeing his personality and interacting with Darnell himself, you can tell that when these people are saying he's the guy who brings the fun, he's the guy who brings the light and all of that to the locker room, I can believe it. That's the Darnell King that I think we've seen on the training pitch, on the actual pitch on match day, and just around in general. It's always the impression that he gives off. And so I think that hopping in and saying that, because part of this, let's be clear, is because people are on Facebook and they're just going, well, he doesn't look like what I think a captain should look like, and all of that. Oh, he's not the one being vocal when, after the one goal. Well, there are different ways of being a captain, right? There are so many different ways of approaching that role that it's almost as though you can't just say because he doesn't do your preferred role that he shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. There's this captaincy badge, right? I mean, you just look in the world of soccer. The one I think of that springs off my head is Carlos Puyol. He's, Darnell King's not going to be a Puyol and grabbing his players and do that. The players who have the captaincy badge all approach it very differently, and it's all about the impact you have on your teammates on and off the field in different ways, right? Doesn't have to be the most vocal man, but I think what shows that he deserves that captaincy badge is the reaction from when he got it, which was all positive and all the team was excited about it, and his reaction to this mistake, right? What Rick and what Marcus said, and what the team is, saying to defend it, that just shows how much he means to the club and means to the team both on and off the field, right? That's what a captain means to a club. So you got it. Obviously we both understand the mistake and what happened, but you're backing the captain, you're backing what happened, and it's all about responding to this. It's all about what he does next. That's going to be huge.
And when we look at even just this conversation, this kind of criticism and speculation that's going on, that we're having the talk about, that's happening on social media, is this ultimately going to be helpful?
Yes, I think it is, just in the sense of how he's going to respond to it. Because, I mean, when we talked to Greg and when he faced criticism, we saw how he responded. He responded very well and he moved forward. I think this Darnell, he's going to learn a lot from this situation, right? He's going to learn from the criticism, right? He's not going to take this completely to his heart and let it affect him in the negative way. He's going to say, yes, I messed up as a club. I understand the fans' frustrations and some points. I got to be better on the field. I cannot let my frustration in the game take it out, because that's not what the club needs, and I'm putting my club in a bad situation. So I think he's going to take that into effect. I think he's going to learn a lot from conversations, because conversations are being had, one-on-one with Rick and with the team about what happened there and moving forward. So I think just these conversations are going to help him grow as a captain, because as we mentioned, this is still his first year. There's still a lot to learn being a captain from a club, especially with high expectations and all that in a league, right? With a very passionate fan base. There's a lot to go with it, and I think he's learning that.
But see, there's a part of me that just feels like the fact that we're having it's not the fact that we're having conversations and saying what the expectations need to be and all of that, and reasoned discussions, say. So what we're doing is trying to be reasoned here. And what Rick, I'd imagine, is doing behind closed doors is reasoned discussion. My fear is that the kind of like reactionary knee-jerk sack him as captain approach is harmful to someone who I think is at this point trying to work on what exactly his kind of approach to captaincy will be, especially because it's very early doors, right? And he's following in someone's footsteps who've been doing this for a while, and so he's trying to become his own captain. He's probably got elements of Solomon Asante in his head that are, but is that necessarily who he is? And there's all these different things going. And I know that early doors things were hard because of the bad results to start the season. And Rick even admitted that, there were times when Darnell kind of took that to heart quite personally, and he was having sleepless nights. And that was somewhere perhaps where Rick needed to be a bit more proactive and helping him out as a captain and adjusting into that new role. But it's just that thing where I wonder, is the kind of fact that there are people as irrelevant as they might be out there saying strip Darnell of the captaincy in an atmosphere like USL, this isn't like, it's not like big, playing for a huge club whereby it just gets lost in the noise. Some of these things do stand out a little bit more. And I just wonder if it's just adding pressure that's not necessarily needed. And I mean, even let's be straight clear here. If you wanted to strip him of the captaincy, and this isn't a comment on Darnell as a person and the fact that I think he'd give up, I think it's a comment on the fact that if you want to strip him of the captaincy at this point, just be clear that you want his confidence to go through the floor. You want him to have an atrocious season because his confidence will go through the floor. And you've now got to work out what on earth you are going to do about that right back position. It's just stupid knee-jerk nonsense that's ultimately not going to help anybody.
And that's where I think I would worry, is if there was an actual thought of stripping the badge, right? And if there was conversation right after the suspension, let's say King gets another red card, right? And then you think, Rick would start actually thinking about it, and then, start looking into those comments, right? And that's where I worry, because as you mentioned, right, there's one thing, the fans can say what they want right now and, feel how they feel about it and say, remove him, it's not my captain, whatever. But then there's another thing to actually, revoking that badge and just how that affects a player moving forward. As you mentioned, confidence wise and all of that, right? You just don't feel like you belong in the club anymore because you failed as a captain, right? Your confidence is down as a player, right? You just don't feel like you're in here, you're in the right place. So it's just utter nonsense if we reach that. If we reach that moment, that's when I'm going to worry. But the nonsense right now does not have me worried too much, because I know it's just fans, right? Just, mad about the results, mad about where the club is right now. And they who do you take it out on? Either Rick or the captain right now. And then obviously you can take it on, the higher ups. But those are the first two people that are going to face criticism with these results. So I'm not too worried, at least.
We shout out the people in the chat here. Kieran saying those people are just mad they can't complain about the beer lines anymore. Very similar comment out of Tori as well. I think we can still complain about the beer lines getting better for sure, but still way too long. Scott here adding in that supporters are not used to the team struggling and don't know how to handle it, so lashing out at everything. And Michael Vanderplas there, stupid, say it louder.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Edwin, let's change it up a bit and talk about our partners at the DraftKings Sportsbook. The NBA playoff action is non-stop on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on any team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. Looking to turn a small bet into a big payday during the playoffs? With DraftKings same-game parlays, you can do just that. Create your own parlay by combining multiple bets, like which team will win, total threes made, total rebounds, and more, and you have a shot at an even bigger payout. Right now, all customers can place a same-game parlay with 3 or more legs and get a free bet back up to $25 if one leg doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PHNX. Bet $5 on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's promo code PHNX. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 or over, Arizona only. Gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And of course, if basketball isn't your thing, if you're not riding on the Suns hype train, which, let's be clear, you should feel bad for not doing so, there is a lot of football to bet on with DraftKings as well now. So, Edwin, why don't we have a look at tomorrow's USL games?
Yeah, let's take a little gander into it. Props to you on the ad reads. No Ramon today, and I know people earlier were commenting, so props to you. Owen with the great reads.
Only one little stumble in there. It's
Only
okay. We're
one.
getting there.
It happens.
Only
It
one.
happens
It's
to the
fine. It
best
happens.
of
It's
us.
only one. This is my first time doing this. So let's
It's
have a look
tough.
at those games. Atlanta United 2 against Lou City. Who are you thinking?
I mean, this one's so tough. You really. I'm just kidding. You know the
It's a
answer.
heavy favorite, Lou City. There
Yeah,
is what
Lou
we're looking
City.
at, and I think that maybe not one which I'd go to bet on that because
No.
they're too heavy. Now, Birmingham Legion against Miami FC. This one's an interesting one because you'd feel as though that Miami FC team do have enough in them to get a result away to Birmingham Legion. Birmingham Legion, they are a favorite in this. They're at -105. Miami FC are at +260. A draw is +220.
Ooh, I like the odds on Miami. I'm backing them, boys. I like the way that they're starting to play. I think they're figuring it out, and I mean, I think they're top 5 in the Eastern. Given obviously it's early days and all that, but I back Miami to get a result in that.
I think that they've got a chance there. I don't think that Birmingham Legion have been playing their best football this season, so we'll have to see. El Paso Locomotive favorites against FC Tulsa. Of course, FC Tulsa have managed to pull up some surprises this year. A lot of them at home, of course, but even then, when you're looking at a team that's +360 to win away in El Paso are starting to fire now. That's the thing. I think they've finally found that groove, and we are starting to see them actually, do what we're used to seeing El Paso do, which is win games.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know.
I back El Paso in this game. I think you mentioned it. They're getting to that moment, and I think they're streaking in the right direction. So you don't want to bet against them right now, especially with them being home. So I'll back El Paso.
And then I mean, you can get the draw no bet on that, by the way, if you do want to go Tulsa route, +215, which to me is not a bad bet. I think there's a chance of that. There's a chance of that. There's a chance of that. And then arguably the game of the night, Sacramento Republic against New Mexico United. That one, everything is plus money. So they are
a lot of intrigue.
Sacramento are favored here, but not too heavily. I don't know. I don't know what I'd go for on this.
It's hard to pick, especially the way New Mexico has been playing as of late. It's hard to pick them. You'd think that they were going to eventually figure it out and bounce back, given what New Mexico does. But again, Sacramento, good squad. Obviously Rising's going to face them soon, but they have a tough schedule coming up, right? They're going to have a lot of questions of how they face this upcoming week. So there's a lot to be said about this matchup. I don't know who I'd give it to. If I had to pick one right now, I would just pick the draw to be safe. But I don't know what way I'd lean.
Well, just to answer Harry's question here, we don't yet have a line for Phoenix against San Antonio. We'll get that on Friday usually. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be tweeting about that on Friday. Now, of course, if you don't want to look at USL for tomorrow, there is another game going on. Just a minor game, nothing too huge.
Nothing too big.
CONCACAF Champions League final, second leg. Seattle Sounders against Pumas. Looking at this now, you can get, if you think that Pumas are going to win in 90 minutes, you get +330 on them.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Well, given the history of the tournament, they're really putting
no MLS team has won this for years.
Yeah. And then especially the first game where I think Pumas could have edged it out and gotten the win. First game was a lot of interest, right? And I think the first matchup set up a really good second leg. But I think I'm backing history, right? You always got to look back in history, and it typically is pretty right in the sense that the Mexico sides typically do strong and they figure it out. This is not the strongest Mexican side to reach the final and be there, but I'm still backing the Pumas to win it in 90. I like that bet a lot.
You know what else there is? Even if you want to hedge your bets a little bit and say it might end in a draw, Pumas at +185 on a draw no bet.
Wow, really?
And here's another one. If you want both teams to score, but it not to end in a draw, +170.
That's pretty good given
for a game that ended 2-2 in the first leg.
They could have had more goals.
To score. Yeah. I don't know. I'm feeling tempted by that one.
Well, we might have to look after the show. We might have to lay down some bets ourselves.
We might have to have a little look at this. But You know what? One more piece of rising business I think we should address before we round things out here. We did get some updates on injuries and, of course, on the visa status of Sievert Haugli. So let's go and have a look what Rick had to say.
Yeah, so Musa should be back. He's pretty close. And Sievert Haugli received his visa yesterday, so he's available for selection. Channing had a high ankle sprain. He's probably out this weekend, but I got to, give credit to the Mayo Clinic. They've really been fantastic with us. They've done some experimental treatment. I think we're going to get him back quicker than normal. And Niall Dunn is pushing along. He had a long-term injury, and I think the prognosis was originally July, but we may have him back in training in June, early in June.
So Niall Dunn could be quicker on the timeline than we were expecting as well.
Positive updates, honestly. As a
it's a good update.
Yeah.
Look, we've seen Niall out there at training. He's been doing a lot of individual stuff by himself, so. But he's working through it. We know that he seems to be in good spirits. You'd expect him to be. He's a 17-year-old kid playing professional football. It's
true. Why wouldn't he be happy?
But I mean, I don't know. I'm happy about that. I'm happy to see that he's not too far away. I think that some of the other injury updates as well there, James Musa being back ready. Channing Chasen, of course, causes a little bit of a headache there because he was one possible option to replace Darnell King if it came down to it for this next weekend. Now you'd presume. Again, Rick kept things close to his chest. Said he didn't feel like he was ready to say what he was going to go with this early in the week. We've got a lot of players who can play in different positions, but he did. I think we can all assume at least the most likely player to play there is Joey Calistri, even if it's not going to be the player. And then, the fact that Haugli's available.
It's huge. It's huge. I'm
happy.
It's huge in the sense that defensively, the options are going to be there come summer. Think about it. We're talking about in the two center back spots. It's going to be Farrell, Musa, Madrid, Sievert. Who else am I missing? Dunn. And possibly Lambert, obviously, depends on what they do in the midfield, right? So a defense that still hasn't figured it out is starting to get 100% healthy. There's got to be the solution there, right? There's got to be two of those are going to be your best answer and going to be your best response defensively that are going to improve your defense, hopefully. So I think we're finally going to get some progression there. And Sievert, obviously, it's just another exciting option, right? Because, it's the unknown. Yes, we know somewhat about Sievert and what he's done, but what can he add to his defense? Is he going to be the answer or not? I think that just adds another bone to it that gets you excited at least to see what he will do for them.
We'll have to see, won't we? I'm sure we'll have more to talk about this on Thursday as we look ahead to the game on Saturday night. Remember to join us on Thursday. We'll be back here at 6 p.m. Edwin, you're going to be with us for that one? Or is Sean going to have taken care of you?
No, it's sadly my final week, so I got to do it all with the boys. So I'll be there in studio Thursday.
Well, we'll see if Ramon returns from his unexpected departure.
Yeah, he just got the red card.
He's
the one who's on the red card.
He got the red card, did he? Or if Sean has dealt with him more sinisterly, let's say.
I'll back Sean in saying that it wasn't him. I'm not his accomplice. I'm not here to be a lawyer here. All right, nothing like that. But I'll back Sean and say it was just a red card for Ramon. 1 game suspension. He'll be back Thursday for this great show.
So yeah, remember to join us on Thursday at 6 p.m. You know where to look for us, and of course, subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. Until then, goodbye.